Hello, Daithí. Welcome to 15 Minute Coffee. How are you keeping?
I'm flying it now, Alan. Thanks for having me. How are you going yourself?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Delighted to have you on. So I suppose we'll start with a congratulations on your new role as program manager of Gaeilge 365
Yeah, that's it.
at
Yeah.
Dublin City Council. So do you want to start by telling us a little bit about the initiative, what it is, what your role is, and sort of what the goals are for the project?
Yeah, so Gaeilge 365 is the country's first innovation unit, which specifically looks at how to strengthen the usage of the Irish language. So, as I'm sure a lot of listeners in Ireland are kind of aware, but maybe global listeners mightn't be, there's an Indigenous language in Ireland called Irish, which is spoken on a daily basis by around 100,000 people, but there's about 1.5 million people who can speak it. And what the statistics will tell us, say, for Dublin City, is that 61% of all citizens wish they were speaking Irish more often. 30% of citizens can speak Irish, but I think in around 1% are speaking Irish every day. So there's a kind of bit of a challenge there in that people can speak Irish, people want to speak Irish, but unfortunately people aren't. So really, I'm setting up this new kind of innovation unit to come up with kind of new ideas and new ways of thinking, which can help kind of bridge that gap for people.
Yeah, and I suppose before you got into this, and a few years ago, you set up Gaeil Óga, which is a perfect example of what you're just speaking of. And I suppose what inspired that, and what is Gaeil Óga, and what was the inspiration behind that, and
Yeah,
how has that sort of evolved?
so I think people, when they think about the Irish language, everybody likes to project the solution to their own story. And for some people, that story is they didn't manage to learn the language particularly well in school. Maybe they didn't have a particularly positive experience. But for a lot of people, it's a very different story. So we have tens of thousands of people going through Irish medium education where they're doing all of their education through the medium of Irish. We've many more who've received positive experiences of the Irish language through maybe Gaeltacht summer courses or through English medium schools. But what happens is if you leave the education system as a fluent Irish speaker tomorrow, there's only a 4% likelihood that you're going to speak that language every day. So really the main challenge that I would see is ultimately we've lots of people who can speak the language, but there's just nowhere for them to speak it. So that was something the first kind of struck me when I was in college. I was about 20, and I was like, well, why is there nowhere really? There seems to be a lot of people who can speak this language. Lots of people want to speak this language. It seems to be very important to a lot of people, but there's no real focal points to bring people together. So I just got talking to a couple of people, and we had a fairly simple idea. What had happened if we set up an Irish speaking GA club? And I remember at the time, we kind of put the idea out there, and there were some people who were kind of very critical. Like the Sunday Independent at the time published an article outlining all the reasons why they thought we wouldn't succeed. But at the end of the day, I think, you know, ultimately language is important for a lot of people, and with the Gaeil Óga, we've been the fastest growing sports club in the country over the last kind of 10 years. We now have 600 members playing across 40 plus teams, but more than anything, we've created a model which shows that when you create vibrancy, when you create this infrastructure for people to speak Irish every day as a community language, that there are a massive amount of people who are willing to engage. And what's really interesting is we started off with our adult teams located kind of in Phoenix Park, and that's where they still train. But 70-80% of our membership is based out in Lucan, in West Dublin. So when we started off, Lucan was probably just like any other suburb in Dublin, whereas now it's the place with the highest density of people speaking Irish outside of the education system. in the whole country, excluding obviously Gaeltacht areas. So there really is a model there which shows when, to paraphrase Kevin Costner, when you build it, they will come.
Yeah, and I think like that's it's so interesting to hear that that side of it, where I think once you create a space that interests people alongside the language, because I think the language alone, especially for say someone like me who wouldn't be fluent but they have an interest in Irish, or they want to learn it, it's an easier sell to say come down and play a sport that you've played your whole life, and to do something that you do already, while also learning from fluent Irish speakers and learning the language.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of massively important. I think, languages need to be alive. And I'm not sure how alive a language can be in a classroom environment. And I do think when you create experiences that are just kind of cool, vibrant, interesting experiences. So a lot of people, particularly at adult level, like they play for us because maybe we're the closest GA club to their house. We've plenty of examples of people who've come down to training and they'd literally just put into Google, where's the closest GA club to my house? And they've arrived down and they've been like, what's going on here? And like, oh, we're an Irish speaking club. You up for that? And just 9 out of 10 times they just say, yeah, Jesus, sure, why not? And like, it's great. Not only do they get all the benefits of playing sport, and playing the GAA, such as, physical activity, exercise, connection to community, but they also get that kind of connection to language as well, which is something that people tend to be very thankful and grateful for. It's a thing I think a lot of people feel maybe isn't attainable, but it really, really is, But at the same time, like, there's no point in just looking at the Gaeil Óga and saying how great it is. Like, there needs to be more things out there, So, of all the voluntary groups, so let's say sports groups, gardening clubs, drama clubs, all of those in Dublin City. I think 99.86% of them are operating solely through the medium of English. You have, of all the businesses, all the retail businesses out there, only 0.1% are signed up to schemes to promote the use of Irish in their businesses. So what we have is we have 164,000 people who want to, or who can speak a language, and whom all the research will say want to speak that language more often. And we've only 6,000 people speaking it every day, but you have that massive disconnect where we don't have enough businesses, public services, voluntary groups, sports clubs, which are able to kind of, which are able to cater for that kind of latent demand and active demand that's out there.
And what are some of the things, I know it's early days, but what are some of the things that Gaeilge 365 and Dublin City Council are starting to do to fill that gap? Or
yeah, so I suppose we're looking at a couple of things. I think for a long time, when it comes to how can we strengthen usage of the Irish language, people have been stuck in a bit of a paradigm that's kind of a bit of a rut, really. And it kind of tends to lead to, let's do more Irish language classes and maybe a Kirkle Core on the local library. And, do you see that sign over there? Make sure it's bilingual. And really, there needs to be more. There's so much more that's possible. So one of the things that we kicked off last week was on Corla Crackall. That's an entrepreneurship program for Dublin City Council employees to help them develop new innovations and solutions that will create opportunities for people to speak Irish in local communities. So what could that mean? Like, the answer is we don't know at the moment. Maybe that might mean swimming classes through Irish in your local council-owned gym. maybe that might mean it might mean the local enterprise office is running courses in Irish language entrepreneurship, and how people can use the Irish language as a USP for their business. Like,
Mm.
we're not fully sure yet, and part of me doesn't want to limit what's possible. But what we know is that we'll be looking to move away hard from the kind of stock stuff that's been done for the last 100 years and hasn't really moved the dial massively. So yeah, we're really excited about that. We're also kind of going to do similar programs out in the community, helping build capacity of young Irish speakers in particular to build that language infrastructure, to build the kind of groups, community groups, sports clubs, because at the end of the day, yeah, it's 99.86% of things are operating solely through the medium of English, but each and every one of them was set up by a person or a group of people. So as passionate Irish speakers, if we want to change that, we need to go and we need to start saying, okay, well, like, what infrastructure can we build to make sure that it's easy and accessible for people to speak Irish in our community on a daily basis.
Mm. And I think that's a great sort of model for innovation, is that supporting people, because everyone has great ideas within them. It's allowing people to pursue those ideas and sort of encouraging that rather than forcing ideas onto people, letting innovation arrive naturally.
100%. And one thing I find interesting is there's probably a bit of a space for both, in that some people love the ideation part of it, and some people love the implementation part of it, and some people love both. And I do think a space needs to be created for people who love spotting good ideas and maybe bringing those into their local community and how they can be supported to do that. And equally, there's probably a space there for people to come up with their own ideas and how we can kind
Mm.
of support them to do that. So yeah, I think what we want to do is we want to create a gold standard. We want to show people what's possible, but we want to do it in a way that builds solutions that are replicable and scalable. So we want stuff that, you know, can happen in Cabra, can happen in Clontarf, but equally can happen in Clonmel. Uh,
Mm.
and we want it to be stuff that compounds. So I think where we've been for a long time is, we organised a big night out for Irish speakers in a local pub, and it cost 10 grand to organise it, and 500 people came. Whereas, what had happened if you put a bench in the local park that said, "See and show mo Daithí de Buitléir out a strong chair. Sit here if you'd like to speak Irish to a stranger." Maybe only 3 people a day might do it, right? Well, let's say that
Mm.
costs €2,000. So over the course of the year, you're going to stimulate 1,000 people to connect with each other, over 1,000
Mm.
people to connect with each other. And it's going to cost you a fraction of what the big night out with 500 people will cost. So I'm really interested in that space of kind of compounding. So not just kind of one and done. You go
Mm.
in, you make a big splash, and there is always a role for those sort of things as awareness drivers, as kind of community builders, as things which give people kind of hope, and build belief. But I'm really interested in that whole space of, well, what can we do that's scalable, replicable, that compounds, stuff that really is going to, connect Irish speakers in communities in ways that will allow them to continuously engage with each other through the medium of Irish.
Mm. And I think just hearing that sort of long term thinking and thinking forward rather than sort of, I suppose, transcending the current moment and looking forward, I think that's a really encouraging thought, and it's great to see from Dublin City Council and yourself. So I suppose just before we wrap up, I'd love to get, I know from knowing you a bit personally, I'd love to hear a bit about your relationship with sport. So I know you play, you coach, and you're also a chairperson. But in terms of sport, what is the role of sport been in your life, and how important is sport to you?
Yeah, so was a chairperson of the club, no
Excuse
longer.
me. Excuse me.
Yeah, sport for me, I suppose. I think your relationship with sport evolves as you get older. For me, so much of it is around learning, learning about myself, learning about others. So much of it is about connection and community. I love the fact that I don't think that men are particularly good at, and the research would show that men aren't particularly good at maintaining friendships. I love the fact that without really thinking, because I play hurling, I get to go meet up with all my friends twice a week, do something we love together, and none of us really has to organize it.
Mm,
And I think the day that that kind of stops, we'll go from seeing each other twice a week to twice a year,
mm,
so I do love that. I love the purpose that comes from it. And I love in particular, say with the hurling, like I was playing a match there at the weekend, and I'm hurling now 25 years, and I executed a skill in a match for the first time ever, and I just love. Now I'd never even had reason to try the particular skill before, but
mm,
just the opportunity presented itself to execute a particular skill, and I just love that with hurling, that there's thousands of different skills, and I love the mastery aspect of that. I love just going out. I remember meeting a fellow one stage, and he said he was well into his 70s, and he was a well-travelled man, and he said, I've been all over the world. I've eaten food in over 50 countries. I've seen the Taj Mahal, the Eiffel Tower, the works. And you know what? I've never found something more enjoyable than to hurl the ball in the wall, he says. I do think there is something in that. I just
yeah.
love the sense of freedom and abandon and play. And I think that's important. Life makes you grow up.
Mm,
Sport maybe allows you to stay young, and I
mm,
often see that with people I know who maybe have been involved with teams for a long time, and maybe they're kind of, into their 50s or 60s, but they're still have that vitality of youth. And oftentimes when they step away from the teams, just they could age 2 decades in
mm,
years,
mm.
and so yeah, that's me in sport, I suppose.
Yeah, I think just to tie it all up, I think one thing that came across both Gaeilge and sport there was that idea of connection, and whether it's connecting through the medium of a language or connecting through the medium of sport. I think like having a way to connect with others is so important. And like you said there, it's even better if it's play and it doesn't feel like you're forcing anything. It's a natural sort of medium. So I think that was really interesting. But
Yeah, 100%. And I think the world, as a default, one thing I find interesting is, for people, a lot of people who are looking to buy houses, you'd often hear, oh, I want a south facing back garden. And what they mean there is that their back garden will get more sun. But as a
mm,
construct, that's kind of interesting, because ultimately, if you're in your back garden, how are you connected all the time? How are you kind of connecting with other people around you? And I often see friends of mine who've moved into places who have north facing back gardens, that they actually have much better connection with their neighbours and much better sense of community, because all of them spend all their time in the front garden getting the sun as opposed to the back garden. And I do
yeah,
think the world is defaulting towards being a slightly colder place, and anything we can do to connect people, like connection is so fundamental to the human experience. And I think anything we can do to drive on that connectivity is massively important, and is massively beneficial for people and for communities and for wider society.
absolutely, absolutely. I could chat to you all day that year. We'll get you back on eventually. But thanks a million for giving me your time, and I think that's a lovely way to wrap up.
Cool. Thanks, million, Anna.